Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever. Hello and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective, and this is my co-host Shannon Callery, head practitioner of the practice.
Hi.
And welcome. Today we're talking all about hormones, and hormones are really big and complex topic. So we decided to kind of narrow this down a little bit. And today we're really going to focus on menstruating women. So if you do not fall into this category, hold on tight because we will do another episode geared towards probably your group and kind of where you're falling here. But today we're primarily just focused on hormones as they relate to menstruating women. I will also say some of this will also apply to other individuals, whether you're a female in a different stage of life, whether you're a male. Some of this will apply. So if you want to maybe like fast forward to some certain parts, it may relate to you and you may get some good information and insight, tips, tricks. We're going to talk about hormone testing today, which relates to really everyone. So that's kind of where we're landing with this episode. So as per usual, Shannon and I have both had hormonal issues.
Yep.
Of all kinds of sorts, which I'm sure we will also touch on today. For reference, in case you don't know, I'm 34. I was in perimenopause in my late 20s and was able to reverse out of it. So if you fall into this category, FYI, it is possible depending on your age and where you are. Not saying it's 100% possible, but we're going to talk a lot about what quote unquote normal looks like, and what optimal really looks like, what can go wrong, how to support hormones. And then once again, we are going to dive into hormone testing. We will also just hot topic here. We're going to touch on birth control. So
A little bit. Yeah,
just a little bit. We're not going to go too deep, but I personally have a lot of feelings on birth control, which I'm pretty open to sharing, and also recognizing it's a very personal decision, which we will also touch on. So let's just start here. Broad overview of if you're menstruating female, what are some things that we can experience that are maybe thought of as pretty common and quote unquote normal, but really are not?
yeah. This is such a big thing, just especially in our society. I feel like anything like hormone wise around periods. So I'll start by listing some of like the more common things that especially we see in our practice too and have dealt with before personally. So breast tenderness, that's a really big one in fact, I was just in the gynecologist's office talking about this, having her tell me that this was fairly normal, and we do not believe that's true. Breast tenderness around your cycle, kind of a good sign that something else is going on there. Cramping, like severe cramping. I mean, even we'll just say cramping as a whole right now. We'll dive into that a little bit more. Pain, especially like, pelvic pain or like back pain, hip pain, any kind of pain around your cycle, but not so normal. Headaches for sure, headaches and migraines, skin issues. So like acne is probably the biggest one that I'm thinking of. Some people have flare-ups of other skin issues, maybe like psoriasis, eczema stuff. Again, another good sign that something deeper is going on there. Mood swings. So if you're like, if you're feeling like really depressed around your cycle or really, really angry, anxious, all the things, we have a tendency to just say, oh, that's your period. It's normal. No, not super normal. And then skipping your cycles or having irregular cycles. So obviously that's going to be different if you're taking birth control, but in general, if you have irregular cycles, so say like, you're going maybe 40, 45 days, or like skipping 2 or 3 months, not having a cycle at all. That is not a normal thing. That's not our body's normal process and how it should be functioning.
No. And here's the thing. These are not normal during your period, leading up to your period, during ovulation, leading up to ovulation, like none, you should not. And we are going to talk about what is normal and things to expect at different phases throughout your cycle. However, none of these should be frequent, should be super common, should be reoccurring, should take you out for, days or even a couple weeks. The number of people that come to us that they're like, I have 1 to 2 good weeks a month where I feel generally okay, which is mind blowing and absolutely not normal here. So, just to dive a little bit deeper into this. So, breast tenderness. I will say what is normal or considered more optimal if your breasts get just a little bit bigger or you're like just more aware of them. Not that they're tender, you're just more aware of them. And just like getting slightly enlarged right before your cycle, like right before your period starts, normal, totally fine. But especially if you touch your breast and excruciating, wearing a bra hurts, wearing a shirt hurts, having someone else touch them hurts, that absolutely not normal. And this is going to be a sign of estrogen dominance, which we will get into a little bit later when we talk about hormone testing and what does that actually mean? Is it estrogen dominance? Is it some other stuff going on? All that kind of stuff. The other thing with cramping. So once again, something that we would consider more normal to us. Once again, awareness. You're like, I feel my lower belly. I'm aware that there's something going on, that something's about to happen. I don't want to use the word bloating because that's not quite the right word, but just like you're aware and it feels maybe different, a little
Almost
different than your normal.
almost pressure, like,
Yes.
or maybe, because if we're being honest here, like your body, that is, as a female, that is like your natural detox phase. So like we're going to feel something, we're going to notice more, like you're saying, we're definitely more aware of our body and whatnot. So like feeling some sort of like pressure or something is normal.
Yeah, but having cramping to the point where you have to take something like sharpshooting pain down one of your legs, like almost like a nerve type pain, tingling pain, low back pain, needing, a heating pad all day, every day, for a couple of days. None of that is normal. And then also just to talk about what does an optimal cycle look like and what is an irregular cycle as far as like timing is concerned. So your cycle should, generally speaking, be anywhere between 27 to 33-ish days, give or take like a day. But it really shouldn't be. I also went to the gynecologist not too long ago, and she was like, as long as your periods aren't less than 21 days, then we're probably okay, which no. If I'm getting my period every 3 weeks, something is going on here that we need to talk about. If it's every 40, 35, 40 days, once again, something is probably going on that we should dive a little bit deeper into. So yes, there is some variation within that. However, not a ton of variation. Same thing with the actual length of our cycle. I'd say anywhere from like 3, 4 days up to like 7-ish days is pretty normal as far as like the length of your cycle. Another thing not normal that a lot of people don't know is clots. Large clots. I'm not talking like pinky size clots, just like
Like
one
quarter
or
size.
two. Yeah, like quarter size, multiple, many coming out. This is often a sign of a thyroid dysfunction, which just randomly, most people don't know that. Your thyroid has a lot to do with breaking down clots in your body. And so if your body's not breaking down those clots and they're coming out, we want to take a look at your thyroid first and foremost, along with your actual other hormones too.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just to add on to that too, I will say if you're, if you're traveling around your cycle, maybe you're drinking or consuming more alcohol, things like that, having more stress, because both of those things put stress on the body, it is not uncommon for your cycle to maybe shift a little bit around that, give or take like 3 or 4 days. Like when I'm traveling, if I'm supposed to have my cycle, I almost know that it's going to be adjusted when I'm traveling because the stress that's happening on my body. So I don't want anyone to listen to this and be like, oh my God, mine doesn't exactly align with that. And I thought I was good. There is definitely some wiggle room there.
It's also different too having, one period be a little bit different. I'd say
Yeah.
one, maybe two be a little bit different versus this is just your normal, your regular, and this is what happens every single month and has been going on for months and months and months or years at this point.
Yeah. In bigger things too, just to share like a small story here, when I had an eating disorder but didn't like know that that was an issue at the time, I was actually not having my cycle at all. And I was going into the gynecologist frequently. And, for some reason, it was not a red flag to them. Like nobody really dove deeper in it. They were actually just giving me a pill. I can't remember what it was to start my cycle. And they were like, oh, this might just be what you have to do. Like take this pill every month to have your cycle. Just throwing it out there, if that's something that's happening to you and you're not having a cycle at all, that is not normal. That is a sign that you want to start to look deeper, pay attention to other things that are going on in your body, in your life, whether it's just your eating habits or other things. I mean, we're going to talk about this in a minute here, but not eating enough food can do that. It can completely mess with your hormones. So there's many other things here that go into this.
Exactly. And same thing, I know a lot of women are given some sort of antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication just to take right before their period. Not normal. No, this should not. Your anxiety, not saying anxiety and depression medication's bad. However, if you only have to medicate right before your period because your PMS, your emotions, anxiety, depression gets so bad right before your cycle, this is a massive red flag that something else is going on, and it is time to take a look at what else could be going on in your body and why is this so extreme leading up into your period.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like that kind of leads us into, talking about maybe some of the deeper rooted issues here. So I did just bring one thing up, which is two things actually. So stress on our body, and this can look like many different things. I mean, there's tons of different stressors in life, whether that's like work, family stuff. And we're also talking about the stress that we're putting on our own bodies. So like not eating enough food, working out way too hard, and not eating enough food. I feel like that's something that we see way too often, much more than we would like. Um, Birth control can have obviously an effect on your cycle depending on how long you've taken it too. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more? Because I know you've taken birth control.
Yeah. So I was on birth control. Well, let's just dive into birth control here. So I was on birth control. I went on birth control in high school because I was getting my period basically every other week. And obviously not normal. And Western medicine, if you're a female with hormone imbalances, you know this. Western medicine's answer to hormone imbalances and hormonal dysregulation is birth control. It's what they know how to do. So I don't want to slam Western medicine because once again, and I feel like I've made this analogy before, but Western medicine, the way it works is you have these symptoms that fit into a box. Sometimes, especially with hormones, they'll do some testing here, and then the answer is a pill. And the only pill that is available, or only quote unquote solution available via Western medicine, is birth control, is to just mask the symptoms here, which is an option. And for some, may be an okay option temporarily if you need it. It is also a very personal decision. For me, I know, getting pregnant is not, that is not on my game plan. That's not on my list of things to do. And so that also played a really big role, especially through my 20s, um, as to why I was on it. And birth control was one of the last things I changed out of all of the things that I shifted because of this massive fear of getting pregnant. And part of it was I didn't understand how getting pregnant works because no one teaches us
Mhm.
that you have a real small window of when you can actually get pregnant. It's like a 3 to 5 day window of when you can actually get pregnant. And if you're careful around those 3 to 5 days, you're probably not going to get pregnant. So there are other options here as far as pregnancy prevention. And I've been off birth control for many years now and have not gotten pregnant on
Yeah.
purpose.
And I just want to add in there too, like, because I do know a couple people that this has happened to who kind of misconstrued this information. This applies if you have regular cycles. If you don't have regular cycles, you need to figure that out first before you can go in and start to track naturally. That's essentially what they call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you won't be able to track if you don't know the phases that you're in, when you're in them. That is not a safe way to do that. So I just wanted to add that in there too.
Yes, thank you. And once again, we will talk about the phases here and what that really looks like. So if you're like, I don't even know, we are going to dive into it here.
Yeah.
So the other piece of birth control is you're just masking symptoms. And there's a lot of different types of birth control here. Obviously there's the pill. I was on the pill for most of the time I was on birth control. I've been on many pills. Once again, I also have a history of anxiety and depression. Some of them made them worse, significantly worse, not uncommon. And it's just a big mask. It's masking your symptoms. It's not shifting. It's not changing anything. It's not supporting your body. It's actually putting more pressure on your body because depending on the form of birth control, nutrients can be depleted. It's your liver has to process anything that goes into your body, supplements, medications, including birth control, and that puts extra stress on your liver, which if you have hormonal imbalances, there's a really good chance that you've got some liver dysfunction going on. And then if we look at like IUDs, it's a foreign object in your body. Some people do okay. Many people, not knowingly, your body starts to attack itself with this foreign object. That was me for sure. And I didn't know for many years. And I had lower belly bloat once again, I did everything else before I got birth control, and that was still contributing to lower belly bloat. Even some like pain during sex, it would contribute to that. And that went away after I got off of birth control. And yeah, it's just, and then we look at other forms, the shots, the implants. Every single one comes with a handful of side effects, whether you are aware of it in the moment or not. And one of the things that really led me to get off of birth control is when I found out I was in perimenopause in my late 20s. What was that going to look like for the next 10, 15 years when I'm actually supposed to be in perimenopause? And how is that shift going to look? And I was working with more and more women who were going through that and just all of the struggles and symptoms and everything like that. And I didn't want that because I was already experiencing quite a bit of that. And no, thank you. Night sweats are not fun.
Oh yeah, night
Been
sweats
through
too.
them. Gosh, yeah. So yeah, birth control, once again, very personal decision. It is not the only way to prevent pregnancy, if that is your concern, and a lot of side effects. And you're not fixing any of your hormones. You're just really masking all of the issues. And you better believe when you come off, they're going to come back. And they're often going to come back much stronger than they were before.
Yeah, and that's total. And again, we're not trying to be like fear tactics here because that's definitely not what we believe in. That's not our approach. But it is important to like tune in, listen to your body. If that feels good for you, maybe you need to do it for a certain amount of time. It's a very individual choice, but I would say ask to see the inserts for everything that they're talking about giving you. And this is just like a pamphlet that you can ask for at the doctor's office where it goes over like what are all the benefits, what are all the risks, tell you all the side effects, everything is in there. And these aren't something that they just like willingly give out because they know the information that is in there. So just ask for it so you can see it yourself and just make an informed choice based on your body. When I was in high school, they offered it to me because of, menstrual issues that I was having. And it was like, I did try it. I tried it for a week, but it was like a whole body no. It was like, nope, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So for some reason, and I wasn't even like as in touch with my body back then, of course, as I am now. And it was still a whole body no. Something just told me like, this is not for you, don't do it. So it's just super important to listen to yourself on that and don't let someone else push you into it if you're really not feeling it.
Yeah, and just know there are other options with everything, with pregnancy prevention, with supporting natural hormones, reducing side effects of hormone imbalances. The other thing, just if you happen to be single and looking for a partner, birth control does change who you are attracted to and who is attracted to you. Not saying it's going to make or break a relationship. However, once again, just making an informed decision that if you are looking for a long-term partner, it can impact your body and what you are attracted to and who is attracted to you. So once again, like just make an informed decision with that. And I really don't feel like that's talked about. And I feel like that's a really big deal of like, if you were looking for a long-term partner, you probably want to actually be in touch with your body if that's an option for you. So you make the best decision you can at that time.
Yes, for sure. And are you meaning more like on an energetic standpoint too, or kind of both?
Kind of both. Like it changes like the actual physical chemistry and your pheromones
Okay.
of who you are actually attracted to.
Yeah, and that, I mean, yeah, that is not something that I think I've heard that like once before. Even you bringing that up right now, I'm like, oh my God, I kind of forgot about that. Like, that's not something that you ever hear being talked about, which is super important, especially if you're looking for a life partner. So, something else you might want to dive into on your own and do a little bit more research there.
Yeah, exactly. Once again, just we want to share this information so you can make an informed decision, ask more questions, just so you pick the right decision for you and your body with wherever you are. Once again, we're not anti-birth control. We work with people who are on birth control. We're not trying to pressure people to get off of birth control, but you should be aware of what it's doing to your body because most of us were not given that information, especially those of us who were put on it in high school or our early 20s.
Yeah, and that's like, when you're in high school too, we won't go too deep into that, but your brain's not fully developed. You don't even necessarily know how to make those choices for yourself and whatnot. So yeah, very, very personal thing. But to loop back though to where we started before we dove into birth control a bit, we were talking about what can cause some of this stress on the body and what can cause hormones to get thrown out of balance and whatnot. So just to recap, we did talk about any sort of stress as far as like outside stress, not eating enough food, exercising too much or too intensely, obviously birth control. And then the other two things that we haven't touched on yet are just deeper rooted toxicity issues. So this can look like so many different things like mold, parasites, Lyme's disease, heavy metal issues, like so many different things. And then any other things you wanted to add to that?
I'll also say chronic viral issues as
Yeah.
well, just because,
Okay.
and you said Lyme disease, Epstein-Barr virus, other chronic viral issues, just anything. And broken record, but the liver The liver is such a crucial organ when it comes to hormones, among so many other things. And so anything that impacts the liver is going to play a really big role here. And we'll kind of dive into why this is the case. But if you have chronic viral issues, parasites, gosh, parasites play such a big role when it comes to hormones, sex hormones, thyroid hormones. It's a really big deal. The over exercising piece, just especially with my personal training background, I'm like went back into the gym this morning, and so it's like a real fresh on my mind as I saw people in the gym and saw many women doing high intensity interval training. Over exercising can look really different depending on the person. So, you know, if you're consistently doing a decent amount, and I'll say like maybe more than once a week, maybe more than 15 minutes a week of any sort of high intensity interval training, intervals, circuits, like this is all kind of being looped into this category. Just be mindful that if your hormones aren't in the best place, you may need to reevaluate this. And this might be a forever thing. It might just be a temporary thing while you reduce overall stress inside and outside of your body until you're in a better place to be able to handle that level of stress without it negatively impacting your body.
Yeah. As you were sharing that story, I was thinking about a friend who reached out this weekend, and she's probably going to kill me, but I'm not saying her name, so it's fine. So I also just want to throw this in there too. If you're doing these types of exercises at the gym, even like, I don't know, like fast walking on an incline on the treadmill, if you start to feel like you're going to pass out, if you feel like you're going to throw up, if you feel lightheaded, if you feel sick, these are all really good indications that what you're doing is not working for your body. And if you proceed to push through them, you're only hurting your hormones more. Like, I cannot stress this enough. It's not, and I know, like, again, based on our society, we would be like, yes, push through it, like you're good. No, please don't do this. Like, that is the perfect time to step back and let yourself rest and recuperate. When we talk about putting stress on your body, that's exactly what we're talking about. Your body is trying to say, it's like screaming at you, essentially saying, I don't like this. This isn't working for me. So if that's happening to you, that is like a perfect example of something you might want to look into a little bit more and like take a step back in that area.
Yeah. And once again, like as a personal trainer who worked in many gyms where it was no pain, no gain, can you get someone to throw up in your class? I taught a lot of different types of group classes, and there were certain facilities and types of classes that I taught where it was a sense of pride from an instructor standpoint to have someone in your class throw up. And no, please, if you are throwing up during a workout, if you leave your workout and you feel exhausted and depleted and you need a nap, none of these are good signs. That this is signs that whatever type of exercise you're doing is not appropriate. Even if society tells you this is what you're supposed to do, this is great, not appropriate for your body at this time. Once again, this is not necessarily a forever thing, but in this moment, it is not appropriate for your body.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's helpful to have your perspective on that, or just, I'm sure, for people to hear you say that, because you do have the personal training background. So it's not like, you're not just walking in off the streets with like, no experience here. You actually witnessed that for like a long portion of your job and whatnot.
Yeah, and I lived it.
Yeah.
I was a cortisol junkie. I loved my fasted hit workouts in the morning, my fasted cardio, 2 hour strength training workouts, super low calorie. I was training for a bodybuilding competition before my accident, and I was eating. I was working with someone. Once again, I will not say this person's name, although I have so many thoughts now looking back, but I was eating mostly 12 to 1400 calories a day, lifting 5 days a week. My leg workout was 2 hours long, just my leg workout. And then I was doing anywhere between 2 to 4 hours of cardio on top of
Oh
that.
my goodness. That is
Yeah.
insane.
Uh-huh.
I'm also laughing because I just For those of you that don't know, I asked Megan, I was like, can you create a workout for me that's like no longer than 20 minutes? Like, I don't want to be in there for more than 20 minutes. So just hearing like how intense that is, and you really don't even need that much either. Like that's an insane amount of time.
No, and here's the thing. So I mean, you'd have to go really far back in my Instagram. I think it's still on there, but I do have a side-by-side picture of that year of that program that I was doing. And I did lose like, I don't know, 5 or 6% body fat because I was tracking all of that. But if I look a year later or like 6 to 12 months later, and I was eating like 1900 to 2100 calories and I had scaled way back. Now I was still over exercising, just to be really clear. My body looked so much better. Just the amount of cellulite, like my legs, like I looked stronger. I didn't look, I don't want to say I looked sickly because I don't think that's the right word, but I didn't look great. And
Like
there was a,
depleted. That's the word
yes.
that's coming to my mind.
Yes, I definitely looked depleted. And I was also a personal trainer at that time. And so I was a pretty, like, working a pretty active job a lot of the time. And, and because I was so depleted, then I would, more disordered eating would come out. And so I
Mm-hmm.
would restrict super hard and do 1200 calories. And then at some point I couldn't handle it. And then I'd go on a bender and eat just all of the food, which obviously weren't the best choices either. And so, then this back and forth and yeah, it just wasn't great. I'll also say if you're a menstruating female and your body fat percentage is too low, and that can come from a variety of things, you're probably not having a normal cycle and or you may not have a cycle at all. And you know and I say this as someone, like, once again, like, in the bodybuilding community and who's still in some fitness groups where I see these comments, which is why I'm saying this. Women are designed to have more body fat than men, well, biologically speaking. So, having this like six pack and, your veins and just being bone and muscle with no body fat, if you're having some side effects as a result of that because you are so restrictive and it might be a thyroid issue too, just by the way, there can be that the thyroid can impact that as well. Not necessarily that you are doing that on purpose, but we're designed to have more body fat on our body, and that is normal, that is healthy, and that's just the way it's supposed to be, just by the way.
Yeah. Once I learned that, because my experience, not as, I don't have the personal training background, but from the eating disorder, the under eating, which led to the binge eating, the over exercising, all of that stuff was fairly the same. But once I actually got into this realm of healing, holistic healing, and started to learn about hormones and learned that females are meant to have more body fat on their body, that was like, it was incredibly eye-opening to me, just merely because it was something that I had never heard from like a doctor before, or like someone that I was looking to for advice on what was going on with my body. I had never heard a single person say that. And that just like opened the gate to be like, oh my God, okay, what else am I missing here? Like, what else can I explore?
Yeah, exactly. So just, if that gives you a little bit of validation, and obviously body image issues can be rooted in many, many other things, but we are designed to have more body fat, and that's okay. And we don't need to look anyway. There's no way that we need to look to be beautiful, to have value, to have worth, for any of these things. So
Yeah.
just for reference. And it's also not great for your hormones if your body fat percentage is too low.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And that kind of leads into our last thing that we have not talked about on the list for, deeper rooted issues that can affect your hormones, and that is trauma. This is a big one. I mean, I feel like we actually just talked about a couple different traumatic things like eating disorders and whatnot, and how that can cause stress on the body. But not even, it doesn't have to be just eating disorders. If you had other big traumatic events in your life, even like a crazy car accident or something like that. Obviously, like sexual abuse, any type of trauma that we have held on to. And, maybe you don't even know that it's something that you need to work on yet. If you're a person who feels like they've tried all the things, but you haven't addressed the emotional side, maybe that's a piece that you would want to dive into.
Yeah, and just to share a little story about this. So, the last maybe 2 years at this point, or let me start, about 2 years ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago, I started really understanding that I was operating from my masculine energy most of the time. And I really made an effort to start to dive deeper, to uncover the trauma of that. And yes, it was absolutely trauma based, sexual trauma, just trauma of having to care for myself since I was basically 7 years old, having to make decisions, having to be responsible for everything, having to do all the things. And so I very much in my masculine. And so when I started understanding how much I was in my masculine and then looking at my hormones, I started noticing symptoms of testosterone. Testosterone dominance is what I'll call it, just excess testosterone. And specifically for me, that would look like black hairs, maybe a couple on my chin or on my belly. And these would pop up. And then and I, once again, I just kind of consider like, it's a thing. Like my cycles were normal. Like I didn't have symptoms around my cycle, but I did have these little hairs popping up. And as I started to make the transition, that went away. And I mean, I wasn't doing anything else except focusing on this trauma piece and focusing on being more in my feminine and dropping some of this masculine, finding more of the balance between, masculine and feminine energies, healing the sexual trauma, like healing some of the places of where this came from, and it went away.
It's so interesting. So, I mean, I am also in over the last year in particular, maybe even a little bit shorter than that. I've been focusing on some specific traumas. And I went through a period of like, yes, in the past, like hormone imbalances were not good, missed periods, all the things. But then I worked on stuff, everything kind of like fell back into line and seemed okay. It wasn't optimal. It wasn't like perfect in my mind. Still needed some work. But then when I got done healing from mold, and my body was like, you need to take a break from supplements, like just pause. And I kind of dove into the more emotional side of things with the deeper rooted trauma. As soon as I really dove in and started releasing stuff, it was like my hormones shifted. I will say not in the best way, but I think it's just because there's so many things that are trying to be released that I mean it's messing with my hormones. They're trying to balance out. So it's just crazy. Like, we don't think about that. We don't think about the emotional side of things and how much stress that actually causes our body or like that we hold on to and whatnot. And that can play a really big role here. I mean, I'm actually at this point waiting to do any sort of like hormone rebalancing with supplements until I get completely done with this phase of releasing things because I have a feeling that things are actually going to balance out on their own, which is not an uncommon thing.
Yeah. And here's the other piece, just going off of what you said. If you are doing the bigger, deeper trauma work, understand your hormones may be impacted temporarily. And just understanding that and not necessarily immediately jumping to supplements, not saying there isn't maybe some other support you can do that once again, we will talk about that here, but understand that, yeah, there may be periods of time. I went through a period right before Columbia, where my hormones got real weird randomly. And it was in preparation for the amount of shifts and healing and releasing and all that kind of stuff that happened in Colombia on my ayahuasca journey. And they're back to normal. It took not even a month for them to go right back to normal. Cycles went back to normal, like no symptoms, back to exactly 28 days for my cycles, everything. But they did get weird for a couple months. And as practitioners, especially, sometimes our inclination is, oh, what is going on? What can I do to fix it? Like, how can I jump on that? And I've talked to many practitioners who we understand because we always want to know why, and we always jump to, we have a lot of education and knowledge and
It's a
supplement.
blessing and a curse.
It is, it is. And so sometimes, once again, if you are doing this work, just understand maybe it's time to just let your body do what it needs to do for a little bit and then reassess after a few months.
And you'll know too, like when you, especially if you've done a lot of work on like deeper rooted toxicity issues that we've talked about, you will know your body gets to a point where it's almost like, yes, there are points we need to push through and keep on going. But then there's like a phase we hit where we feel like we're like forcing things to try and work. We're still forcing different supplements to work. And it's at that point where you might want to step back and be like, all right, am I forcing this? If so, that is probably the perfect time to go a different route and like let go of supplements for a while.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So let's dive in here into the four phases and kind of what we can expect during this and what is considered in our world normal, and part of what we can expect, because there are changes, and our bodies are designed to change throughout our cycle, and that is okay. And so just understanding this can be super, super helpful. So we're going to start day one would be the day you get your period. So this is your menstrual phase. This is when you have your period, and you might be a little bit lower energy, just a little. Once again, you shouldn't be like, I need to sleep all day, but just a little bit lower energy, not feeling quite as perky or high focus, or just your sharpest. You may not feel the sharpest and most clear and most energetic kind of going into the first few days here, especially of your cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, that part, that's fairly normal. We just like not, you shouldn't be like lethargic, like Megan said, like can't get off the couch, have to take off work. Again, not normal, but feeling a little bit tired, definitely normal. The next phase after that is the follicular phase. I feel like I can't give specific days because again, that can look different for each people. As far as like general days or general numbers, what would you say for that?
I'd say as your period is wrapping up, and maybe you're just like spotting a little bit, or you're having a little bit of just discharge, but it's not like a full-blown period. That's kind of when that transition usually starts to happen.
Yes. So yes, of course. So like when your cycle is done. So yeah, you may have like a little bit of brown discharge, which just means like it's leftover coming out. That is when the follicular phase starts. When this happens, you start to get, a little bit higher energy. You may feel a little bit more productive, maybe wanting to move a little bit more, not as like nesting and resting. We're just starting to gain some energy.
You also might feel stronger, just in general. You just might feel, and it's not going to be massive, but like if you happen to lift weights and you're like, I can go up probably 5 or 10 pounds heavier on a couple of my lifts during these 10-ish days, 10 to 14 days, kind of depending on the person. Normal. Yeah, that's totally normal, and it's okay.
Yeah, and that kind of extends or continues into ovulation phase. And this is the phase, those like 3 to 5 days that we were talking about when you can actually get pregnant. This is during your ovulation phase. And
Yes.
at this time, you have like, your energy is probably going to be the highest. You're going to feel super confident. We call this like the magnetic phase. A lot of like, females, you feel more sexy during this phase. It's really easy to like, you're getting into yourself in this phase. That's kind of how this phase is. And then
Yeah.
again, with the movement and the exercise, you might be feeling like a little bit stronger, wanting to be more active. That kind of falls in line here.
And communication might be at its highest for a lot of people. And so, if we look at people who focus on a lot on, cycle syncing type things, if you have a big presentation or a speaking event and you happen to be able to align it around your time of ovulation, technically you might be a little bit of a better communicator around this time. You also, just your libido might be a little bit higher and just, yeah, just feeling a little bit more confident and good. And yeah, just this is a good time. Most people feel pretty darn good during this time.
Yeah, I'd say that's like for the people who, are maybe only having one good week, probably around this time is when that good week is going to be.
Yeah.
And then the last phase is your luteal phase. And this is right before you're about to start menstruating again. So during this phase, your energy is going to start to get a little bit lower, just feeling like you're slowing down. Again, you shouldn't feel like lethargic or anything. You're just kind of coming down off of all that radiating confidence you were just having. You might also start to feel a little bit more hungry too as your body prepares to actually have your cycle. Yeah, and just kind of getting into more of a resting phase.
Yeah, and during this time, if I have an Aura ring and I track, and after I ovulate, I start to notice, my heart rate goes up a little bit. I'm talking maybe 2 beats per minute. And it does it every month. It is normal. That impacts my sleep. My body temperature increases. Once again, very, very normal. And we're talking within less than 1 degree kind of thing. It's not crazy, but if you're very in tune with your body, you're going to be able to feel it. And I know my sleep isn't quite as good. It's good, but not quite as good during this phase as other parts of my cycle. And once again, normal. This is completely normal. This is what your body's doing as your hormones are changing during this phase. Once again, the appetite increase. This is normal. And this is not a, hey, go crazy and eat all the sugar, because that's not going to be super supportive of your body. But oftentimes we do need more calories at this phase for many people. And that can look like 150 to 350, I'd say, is pretty average for people if you happen to be tracking. And sometimes, if we don't give in to this, our body will actually hold on to more body fat and store more body fat. So, understanding and recognizing, hey, if you're having cravings, check in with yourself. Where are you in your cycle? Is it a craving? Is it just an increase in appetite? Are you just is your body needing more calories? How can we get that from maybe better, more nutrient dense food sources than, say, a cookie? Another sugary type things, and recognize that this is a normal part. You also might not be quite as clear, like cognition may not be quite as good. I wouldn't say you should feel foggy, because that is not normal, but just may not feel quite at your sharpest during this phase.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, during this phase too, probably a good time for most people when we're talking about those cravings. Like that's when you want to increase like those good quality fats, good quality complex carbohydrates. We're not telling you don't eat any sugar. If you want to eat a cookie, sure, have a cookie. Maybe just don't eat the whole box. Like if you're actually feeling hungry, give yourself some real food, and then you could still eat those other things too.
Yes, exactly. So just once again, this is really about understanding and recognizing this and learning about this, because I was never taught any of this until I sought out the information and started, became a practitioner and all that kind of stuff. So just it's really good information just to know that some of these things are normal and some of these things are not super normal. And know that if you don't feel 100% all of the time, that's also okay. We're not saying that you're going to feel the sharpest, the clearest, you're going to have the best sleep 100% of the time. Recognize that there are physiological changes that go on in our bodies throughout our cycle, and that is normal, and to recognize those. I'll also say, a little controversial too. So, I know there are workout plans, specifically workout plans designed around, depending on where you are in your cycle. And, during the first phase, you strength train, and during ovulation, you do this. And then I understand where they're coming from. And I also, and I don't super buy into it. As far as listening to your body, I'm always on board with that. And I also think a lot of women in particular miss out on some of the health benefits, let's say specifically of strength training, if we're only strength training a week or two out of the month. The chances of you being able to make real progress, once again, like, and I'm looking not necessarily at like physical changes, although if that's what you want, definitely you got to be really consistent if you want to see those, but really looking at strength training in particular is very hormone balancing when done appropriately for your body. Also very good for blood sugar regulation, also good for increasing bone density, muscle mass, all of these things. There's a lot of health benefits, overall health benefits, good for mood. If you have mild to moderate depression or anxiety, strength training is amazing. And only doing it for a week or two out of the month, I think we're missing out on some of the other health benefits here. So once again, I understand where they're coming from. And I really don't buy into that. And probably I'd be really hard pressed to recommend that to anyone.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's really different. Or just the listen to your own body factor. And of course, like your own goals matter. If you are trying to maybe change some physical aspects of your body, then yes, of course, doing it more often is going to be more beneficial. But if you're in your menstrual phase, like I know when I'm in my menstrual phase, like I'm also not doing a whole lot to try and change my physical body right now. But when I'm in that phase, I just feel like slower. I want more walks. I want more stretching, more yoga. Not everyone may feel that way. Some people don't feel that way. So really just like tuning in to listen to yourself is going to help guide you the best.
Exactly. And for me personally, I strength train twice a week for 45 to 60 minutes. I use it for a lot of other health benefits. Keeps my body strong. It plays a really big role in keeping chronic pain away, just for mood. And so, yeah, sometimes I will, if I'm not feeling great during my period or during leading up to my period, yeah, I'm not going to push myself and try and go for, a personal record or a max on a lift. I'm going, I might scale back a rep or two or just maintain weight or, something like that. So just recognizing that once again, I'm listening to my body and I'm also still being consistent because I know there are other health benefits, and those health benefits are really valuable in maintaining that consistency, especially for so many. The consistency of a routine is what keeps them going regularly to whatever it is and whatever we're talking about. And so I think interrupting those routines can be it's just a disservice for a lot of people who already have a hard time with getting new routines in.
Yeah, for sure. And as always, I mean, everything that we do is pretty like bio individual based on the person. So of course, that's always going to be our focus, is it's really going to be different for every single person.
Yeah, exactly. So let's dive into hormone testing here. So we're not going to go crazy deep into hormone testing in this episode, but a couple things once again, just from an educational standpoint, most people don't know this, also have a personal story here. But when we think about hormone testing, so if you go to your gynecologist, if you go to your physician, they're probably going to run a blood test for hormones and real question mark of what they're going to be open to running. And if they tell you to do it on a certain day, and if they tell you to go fasted, I mean, all of these things make a really big difference, especially with hormones, because hormones fluctuate every day, even within the hour, even sometimes within a few minutes. So, and I say this because when we look at blood, we're looking at a moment in time, which for a lot of things has a lot of value because a lot of things aren't changing minute to minute, hour to hour. We still take it with a grain of salt and we still look at the whole picture, which is why when we look at blood work, we don't just, look at blood work and say, here's what it is. We also get to know history and your symptoms and things you've tried and all that kind of stuff. If you've ever had a consult with us, that's how we start every consult before we dive into any sort of test results, because all of that matters. The issue when it comes to testing blood, when it comes to hormones, is our hormones do change so much. And only looking at a moment in time with the blood work, not very accurate. Maybe, depending on the moment, but no real way to know. And so the way we typically, especially in the holistic health world, the way we usually recommend testing is via urine or saliva. Once again, not that these are perfect. However, we do get several hours worth of information versus a snapshot in time. And if you look at, probably the gold standard in functional lab testing for hormones is a Dutch test. Any of the Dutch tests, even the most basic one, you're taking a urine sample throughout the day. You're taking several samples. So we're getting a better range of information to go off of. We're also recommending to do it on a specific time frame based on the start of your period. Day 19 to 21 is when the recommendation usually is. There's also a test where we look at the entire month. And so we look at different days throughout the month, which has even more value because our hormones change so much throughout the month. And so if we can get more information and even a bigger picture, it just gives us more information to go off of.
Yeah, and I want to add this on there too, just because we get this question a lot, specifically with clients. When people are coming to us, we're always addressing like the root issues first. We're never going to start with hormone testing because we always need to look at what's underneath. Why are your hormones out of whack or whatnot? So that if we do any type of bigger hormone testing like this, it's usually going to be towards the end when we've already worked out like the big kinks in your body. And if there's still things going on, then we're going to start to look at the hormone testing there. It's never going to be like our first thing that we look at though.
Exactly. And here's just to expand off of that. So if in our practice, what we do is we have really big things that impact our health. And then we have kind of everything else that kind of falls into this. Hormones are one of the smaller things that fall into this because hormones are impacted by so many things. And so if you have chronic stress issues, if your nutrition and movement and lifestyle and other big chronic issues, the liver's not functioning quite optimally, if we've got gut overgrowth issues, if we've got toxin overload, the viral issues, like those are all big things that if we only look at your hormones and only address hormonal imbalances, guess what? You're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money on a lot of supplements, and they're not going to last because you have to look bigger picture and then work your way in. Otherwise, if you just start in and try and go out, you'll have to do everything at least twice.
Which is what we've both experienced multiple times. So.
Excuse me. Yes. Just having a coughing fit here. Yeah, with SIBO, this is why SIBO is a symptom. Hormone imbalances can hormone imbalances are kind of same thing. Like I'll loop the thyroid into this. Thyroid issues can be a symptom, and there can also be some stuff going on with our thyroid, with our sex hormones. But once again, if we don't look bigger picture and kind of work our way in, you're going to have to do everything at least twice. And it's going to be expensive, and you're going to spend a lot of money on testing probably, and waste a lot of money on testing. And yeah, it's not going to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely, if you're listening to this and you are having hormone stuff going on, you can test if you want, but most often there's going to be like a bigger issue going on that needs to be addressed.
Exactly. And if you do want to test your hormones, you can access a variety of testing options through our Rupa store.
That's right.
Once again, our Rupa store, we make money off of interpretations. However, the actual tests themselves, we don't make any money off of. It's just available so that you can have access to it. It's also the most affordable price that I've seen across the board. So can spend a little bit less money. And there's also a note, by the way, if you actually read the description for many of the testing options that are on there, including gut and hormones, it does say on there, if you take this test and we haven't looked at other things yet, we may recommend, will probably recommend looking at other things because oftentimes these imbalances, whatever might come up on this test, is a symptom of something else going on.
Yeah, good. I love that you have that note in there just to
Yes.
give it an extra push, just to let people know.
Yeah.
Because
Not that everyone reads it, but
yeah, for sure. But I mean, I feel like that's why part of why we're here doing what we do. Like, we're not trying to have you waste your money because we've been there. We've done it before. We've spent tons of money on this stuff, and we're trying to simplify this process for you as best as we can.
yeah, tens of thousands of dollars we've wasted on tests, on supplements, on other random things that we've been recommended. Yeah, so much. So my recommendation always is if you are thinking about getting a functional lab test, have a consult with us first and see if we actually suggest this, because if we think it's going to be really valuable, I promise we will recommend it. If we do not absolutely think it's valuable, we will not recommend it. We don't want you to waste your money. We've been there. We know what it is to waste so much money, so much time on all of these tests. And we don't want you to, we don't, we don't want you to have to go through the same thing. That's one of the reasons why we do what we do, is so that you don't have to go through what we had to go through.
Yeah. Consult is always the best way to go, because then we can actually talk face to face. If you have previous blood work, we can always start there, which is super helpful. We talk about symptoms, all the things. It's just talking to someone in person or via Zoom to actually hear about what they're dealing with, and then looking at any labs that they currently have. That is the perfect place to start, in our opinion.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, and these tests, by the way, hormone testing is extremely complicated. And so the other thing that we want to share is we will share a few things that you can do, supplements and lifestyle things to support natural hormone balance as a way as we wrap up here. And some of these things are not meant for you, even if you have the symptoms. So, and I've seen this so many times, and the one I always kind of start with here is DIM. So many women have symptoms of estrogen dominance, and we'll take DIM to try and filter that out, to try and help with those symptoms. Estrogen dominance is not always just estrogen dominance. So estrogen dominance could be actual estrogen dominance, where progesterone, testosterone, normal, estrogen high. I would say that's classic estrogen dominance. That is not very common from all of the tests that I've taken, that I've seen, that I've interpreted. Oftentimes it's an imbalance of something. Yes, estrogen may be higher. It also only may be one or two of the pathways of estrogen, in which case DIM may not be beneficial because it may not touch one of those pathways. Also, a huge benefit of the Dutch test is we're not just looking at hormones themselves, we're also looking at hormonal pathways, because that makes a big difference. But a lot of times it's low progesterone or lowered progesterone, or an imbalance of estrogen and progesterone and or testosterone. But a lot of times it's this balance of estrogen and progesterone that is the real big issue here. And just taking a DIM supplement, you can actually do more harm than good. And for me, I never recommend something that can significantly impact hormones unless I've seen a test, because I've seen it go really wrong. And I've seen people end up doing way more harm than good when it comes to recommending something for hormones.
Yeah. And this is kind of we have a couple supplements listed out here that are the most common for hormone balancing. And before we even dive deeper into any of them, we'll just preface it with these are band-aid fixes. I mean, I've been there before. Sometimes I've used things to help along the way while I'm getting to the root issue. Yes, that is completely fine. Or maybe you're a person who this works for you and you're fine with not digging deeper. That's completely okay too. But in general, these supplements are band-aid fixes. They're not actually getting to the root of the problem.
Yeah. And where I may recommend something like this is once again, after we've done bigger work and we have a little bit, just a little bit of an imbalance still, and a lot of times this is naturally trying to raise progesterone a little bit more. That's most commonly what I see. However, it really does vary person to person, which is why we will not blanket just recommend anything for anyone really across the board, but especially for hormones.
Yeah, and to list kind of the rest of them that we're talking about here. So inositol is a really, really big one, especially for that I see advertised specifically for like PCOS. That's a big one. Berberine, which honestly has tons of different uses. We already talked about DIM, which is supposed to break down estrogen, but there's so much more to that. And then the other big one is wild yam in supplement form or in like cream form, because it is supposed to kind of go in and like balance everything out. It's not targeted at one specific thing. It's just supposed to balance all the hormones out, which again, I mean, I've used wild yam cream before during like a phase when I muscle tested for it, and it was it was okay. It is what it is. It apparently that was what my body needed at that time, but you're just not going to see huge changes from these things.
Exactly. And once again, if you've done the bigger work and we need a little bit of extra tweaking, that's one story versus we haven't looked at anything. We're just going, hey, you've got PCOS, like let's push you on these supplements. Like, highly recommend not doing that. Certainly your body, your choice. And once again, you can waste a lot of money. Hormones are also just so sensitive and so complicated. Makes me real nervous. Just anyone just willy-nilly go in and try to do hormonal changes and shifts by themselves without some real education, without some real testing to figure out what's going to be the best option for their body and why all of this stuff is going on.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely important not to, especially with hormones too. And we don't really have any like big herbs listed on our, besides like wild yam, but I know there's tons of different herbs out there for hormone supporting, balancing things. And if you are not specifically trained in that, you can do damage in some places that you might not want to. So that is like another area, because I know that's especially when you're walking in like a health food store or something, there's tons of different herbs for hormone support. So definitely need to be careful with that too.
Yeah, exactly. And this really goes across the board with all supplements, by the way. Just
Yeah.
willy-nilly supplementing your body, not always the best option here.
Yeah.
Just a few other things to think about when it comes to hormone balancing, liver support. Your
Mm-hmm.
liver filters out excess hormones. If you've got symptoms of estrogen dominance, of testosterone, higher testosterone levels, liver support. We have all kinds of previous episodes on liver support. Go check those out for sure. And once again, managing stress, sleep, eating enough, nourishing your body, getting enough protein to balance your blood sugar, getting outside, helping to regulate your cortisol, not drinking caffeine on empty, like anything that's cortisol related can often be supportive of other hormones because cortisol is a hormone. But moving in a way that is supportive of your body and isn't too intense, but is just enough for your body, working on regulating your nervous system. All of that stuff is going to be very, very supportive of hormones.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, getting enough sleep, huge thing. And also just like, look at your diet too. If you're eating tons of processed and packaged foods, maybe not eating enough protein or enough quality fats, even enough quality carbohydrates, like good balanced meals, that is also a really great place to start too.
Yeah, protein in particular, making sure you are getting enough protein. And for most women, it does vary a little bit, but I'd say 100 grams at a minimum is probably a good starting point for most women, menstruating women. Really also do not recommend going too low carb. Go, at keto, carnivore. Oh, can you do some real hormone damage that way? Once again, kind of depends on the person, but general place where I'm usually starting is no less than about 75 to 100 grams of carbs. a day for a menstruating female. No fasting, so at least 3 meals a day, that kind of stuff is going to go a really long way.
Yeah, and I know we know that that's a really controversial topic as well, because there's plenty of people in our space who do like keto and fasting and all the things. But in this practice, from what we have seen, all the females that we've worked with, if you're coming in with hormone issues, stopping the fasting, increasing your food intake, adding in good complex carbohydrates, increasing protein, the liver support. I mean, we see massive changes just from doing those things, not even like touching the deeper rooted issues yet.
Yes, protein and liver support. If you do two things, start with those.
Yeah.
Just get a castor oil pack on a couple times a week, or take a bath, get in a sauna, and increase your protein a little bit. Man, does that go such a long way.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think those are all the basics. Good places to start.
Yeah, perfect. So we'll be doing other episodes. We're going to dive deeper into PCOS, endometriosis, perimenopause, menopause, some other groups of individuals that can fall into hormone imbalances or just different phases of their lives. So be sure to stay tuned, check those out. As always, if subscribe. If it resonates, leave us a 5-star review. All of that means so much to us and really goes a long way. We would really, really appreciate it. And be sure to stay tuned for another new episode next week. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.